Well, good evening, everybody, or good morning, rather. It's 12:22 a.m., May 16th of 2020. It actually is a rather interesting service call today. And actually, there's a lot of interesting information that kind of goes along with it. But basically, it was one of those days where you actually had no. Actually, I got the call 2 days ago, actually. But the funny thing was, you ever get that intuition in your head that you're supposed to buy supplies for something that you had no idea was coming. Well, a while, like probably about 4 or 5 days before, and I had this intuition in my head that I needed to stock up on supplies for a job. That well, before I get into all of this, sometimes when you're running a business and that, and you wonder how am I going to make ends meet? How am I going to make a make a quick sale or service call? How am I going to make enough money to stretch out for the rest of the month? Well, basically, I was in a dilemma, and I kind of prayed to God, asking Him, how am I gonna make it for the rest of the month until payday? And He blessed me with a job like I had today. And basically, I'm not done with the job yet. I gotta go back again and finish it. But I had no idea what I was in for, or the kind of people. Nothing bad. They weren't bad people. They were actually quite interesting. There was some ranch out on just down the road from here that called me. That was Thursday night, and they wanted me to come out and see about getting internet ran from the house out to their barn. So interesting enough, if like I was saying before, I stocked up on a bunch of supplies that I had, and I was thinking, why am I stocking up on customary fittings and customary terminal heads and wiring and terminal boxes and it didn't hit me until I was in the middle of the job. And you're thinking, why am I stockpiling on all this stuff? And then it just kind of hits you as you're working on it, and you're like, it all comes together, and it's like God had His hand on this job, and it's backbreaking work, but it's this one's paying off quite well. So basically, the service provider that came out and installed a lot of that stuff, who in their right mind would wire everything up backwards and make it so that the funny thing was as soon as I looked in the telephone and cable box that was on the house, not only were the wires not attached properly, but the installer used scotch tape. And I'm thinking, come on, why would you use scotch tape to attach wires to terminal posts? It was a DSL internet service, and I'm thinking, why would you use scotch tape? Why not just use wire nuts or terminal Actually, I have. This is basically what they needed for the cables coming in, but not quite in this large of a caliper. This is for like 14 to 16 gauge, and I had a bunch. I bought a bunch the other day for like 24 gauge, and the wires. It wasn't wimpy wire. It was all. It wasn't stranded. It was a solid copper. It was a solid copper wire in that. So it, and surprisingly for inside the box for not having a weather stripping seal around it, it was quite clean on the inside. Surprisingly, there weren't any spiders hiding in there, or bugs or earwigs or anything unpleasant. So I was kind of shocked at that. So basically, it was a direct burial in the ground from the terminal boxes out by the road. But the weird thing is, well, like with the telephone, they only use 4 wires instead of 8 wires. So basically, once I got that whole box straightened out and I got everything, pulled everything out and reorganized it the best I could, not only did the internet in the house work a lot better, I actually increased the speed of their megabits just by properly fastening the the four the 4 wires to the terminal screw that went into the house. Because how it was is you had the box, you had 4 posts on the left hand side of the box, and then there's a bunch of little spacers on there. So basically, I made terminal rings or ring terminals that were appropriate for that size of wire, and then I took the spacers out. There are spacers in there. There's just no nuts on there. So I usually carry an assortment of nuts and bolts and stuff in the car. So that came in handy for today's job as well. So I basically made it so that when you put it on there, not only did it sit on there nice and snug, but I tightened it so that it shouldn't come loose like that. Or if that's the way an internet service provider works, where they just do stuff goofy like that, why would they do that in the first place? That's whoever taught them to use Scotch tape to attach wires to stuff like that. And when I stripped the wires, they cut they cut into part of the. I was surprised that the internet worked at all there for all that time. And that's something that the homeowner I know didn't do because there was a tamper seal on the box and it was now broken. I broke the seal, of course, but like I told the customer, I'm like, I was never in here. And he says, I won't tell him. But the installers from that certain company, if they could get a different internet provider, they would jump to a different one in a heartbeat. But since they're out in the country and their only option is that one company, that's all. why they're sticking with it, because that's all they have. So then I went to the box in the barn, and that was a huge mess with just scotch tape holding stuff together and stuff all cobbled and shoved in there, all catawonky. And so I straightened that out, and then I tested between me and the guy that made the service call. I brought my probe or tone generator testing kit along, and I had him go. So not only what I did was, because he wanted it, because originally in the barn it was set up as a telephone out there, but he didn't want it as just a phone anymore. He wanted that as internet. So what I did was, I was saying, oh great, I'm gonna have to rent a ditch witcher and trench a line. And then I thought I better look at the wires and see what's in the terminal box. Well, long story short, I ended up just replacing a lot of stuff inside there, as far as like the fittings and stuff, because a lot of the fittings that were in there were not the correct fittings. So that was some of the stuff I had to kind of retrofit, because I didn't have time to order it online, because for their business, that they just want to get internet down there ASAP, so that they can have Wi-Fi down in the barn, so that they can stream music and eventually get a television that specializes in doing advertisements and stuff like that. So after, because his idea was like, why didn't you just crimp an end on there and just somehow tied together? And I'm like, well, could work, but I don't know. So basically, what I ended up doing was, I had a whole stockpile of wall jacks here. So what I got kind of creative. I I have to admit, I suck at making Ethernet cables, so I didn't. That would have been the more neater way of doing it, but since I sucked at it, I bought a bunch of those cheap plastic boxes. I don't have any here; they're all in the minivan. Where it's for about $3.50 a piece after tax. Where it's a plastic box, and you open it up, and you got 8 screws, different color coded. You got your black, white, and orange, and blue, and red, and yellow, and green, and brown, or something like that. So then you just color code according to the instructions on the back of the packet that you get with it. So the box up at the house had one terminal box, and then I put another terminal box inside from the router to, because there's 2 lines coming in. Actually, there's a line going to the barn. So what I ended up doing was, there's 2 lines coming from the house. One was from the road, and the other one was to the barn. So I made it. I could have just made Ethernet, a lot of Ethernet cables, but so between a couple of jumpers, because I had a jumper. Actually, yeah, I had to have 2 terminal boxes for the box in the barn, or one of those plastic, the terminal boxes I call it, with Ethernet ports on it. One from the house, from the house or the line going to the barn, from the house to the existing phone line slash or category 5 Ethernet going into the building. So I spliced another jumper and put that together. That was a tight fit, but we managed to get all those wires back in there in a much neater fashion. Now, if any internet service provider saw how I did that, they would say, they'd just be kind of like, why did you do that? And it was more of an easier solution, and you can get it done a lot faster on the fly. So basically, once I got done, it only took me about half hour to get everything color coded correctly and verify that everything was wired correctly. And then down in the barn, I redid the wiring in that area as well, because that was a complete utter mess. So that was about 7 hours later, and the bill is probably going to be around $500 depending on what else has to be done, because the router is the main. Because once I got everything wired up, I went down there with the computer and I plugged into and I was not getting a signal or anything. And I thought, oh great, I messed something up. So I opened everything up again and verified everything, and everything was correct in all the places up to the house. And I thought, oh great. I thought there was a broken wire somewhere or something. No. I even probe tested everything, and everything came back clear there. So, and then I went into the house to look at the router, and when I plugged the data jack in, none of the ports on the router were working. So that kind of put a damper on finishing it. So basically, not only is the internet service provider a real quack, but their routers are good for garbage as well. So I would really like to say who these people are, or the internet service provider, but I have a funny feeling if I say this on YouTube, they're gonna somehow catch wind of that, and they're gonna sue me for like billions and billions of dollars. And it's not even a large company. I've done many service calls with people that had the same internet service provider, and they had just as much trouble as these people were. There was one time that there was a lady that was just down about 15, 20 miles from here that had the same service, and her email wasn't working correctly. And so I called the service provider up. It only took me about 15 times until they actually sat and picked the phone up. And I'm like, well, aren't you ever going to upgrade your service? And they said, no, we ain't going to upgrade. We don't care about the customers. We just want their money. Go F off. And I'm thinking, good grief. Where do they get off using profanity over the phone? Well, no wonder the company only has a 1-star rating. But a lot of these people are stuck with them because they don't have any other options. They could use cell phone service as a means of internet, but even cell phone reception out there sucks. But to have an internet service provider get all mad and huffy and puffy when you call about a problem, and most of these people that have problem with their service, they don't scream and rant at the service providers. They don't even scream and holler at them. They're actually afraid to call them because the internet service provider actually snaps at them. And As a service provider, shame on them for treating their customers like like rubbish. Well, where do they get off getting away with that? Just because they know that they have these people in for life doesn't necessarily mean that they should treat them like garbage. I know that they have to make money in that, but they don't need to treat them like rubbish. And it's like here in my business, I well sometimes I get a little testy, but especially when you only get 2 hours of sleep a night, or you're on the clock on an emergency service call, and you don't even get home for several days at a time to actually even get sleep. Then you tend to get tired and you overthink things and you just kind of get repulsively crazy. There's days that I get like that, but it's not a healthy thing to do. Is be on the go so much that you don't even get sleep. I didn't get home until like 4 o'clock yesterday morning from work. I didn't even get to my other job today. I had a whole bunch of stuff I was going to do outside, but well, I kind of needed to take care of this service call. So basically, best word of advice is treat your customers with dignity and respect, and they will use you for a lifetime. Well, not physically use and abuse you, but what I'm trying to say is they'll rely on you for future problems, and you gotta look at it this way. Sometimes your customers aren't. Sometimes they only come to you once, and then you have some that are repeat customers, and you have to realize you can't please everybody. Doesn't matter how hard you try. You're not going to please everybody that comes through your door. And I got some that you try to make an effort, and you try to do the best you can, and you just sometimes you don't always or you don't always pass their standard of computer care, and you can't get all upset and bent out of shape over it. You gotta take it just one day at a time, and it's kind of a hard thing to. It's hard to grasp. I admit that but the thing is, you can't beat yourself up over it either. You gotta, you gotta look at it this way. Well, it's their loss. If they don't want to come here and get spectacular service, then so be it. But it's eventually your business will grow, and eventually you will get enough people calling each week to successfully make it on your own. Because my kind of new idea is I would like to hire a secretary, somebody to answer the phones, do emails, and mind the store, and then possibly even hire another technician to be here as well. And but I'd have to have at least a couple million in savings to pull that one off. If I could pull that off, I'd buy this place and make this operation even bigger than what it is now. It's if I had a secretary in that, it would things would be a lot more organized here. This place would actually have 9 to 5 hours, but it's not unrealistic thinking either. Unrealistic thinking is living in a huge mansion, wanting a Lamborghini and a Range Rover, having a huge chain of retail stores at the age of 30. There's some people out there that have had that experience, but when you're starting a business, you got to start out small. Even before I got this place, I was working out of the back of my car. I didn't even have a van at that time. When I had, actually at the time, I had two cars. One was I still have the second, or I still have my second car yet. I got that Nissan or that Infinity i30. I never really used that for service calls. I use it on occasion, but mainly I used that ratty looking sun faded 2000 Plymouth Neon, very stripped down. The only thing luxurious about it was the cassette player and a defroster and tilted steering wheel. But that was my go-to vehicle for doing service calls. But when I started doing it in 2016, or January 2016, I probably only had two service calls for the whole month. And in March, I had one service call for the whole month. May, I roughly had like three service calls for the month. June was like five. Um, July was none. August, one for that year. October, I didn't have any. November, I had a few. December, and all or majority of January, I didn't have a single call. At all of 2018, that's when business started picking up, but that was because I was working with a Pentecostal ministry in Manitowoc. And unfortunately, that ministry is no longer, I can't find it anywhere now. But that was when I was working with that pastor, that was when I had a lot of business. But due to my stupid mistakes, I kind of did a few things I regret to that pastor after all the nice things he's done for me. But and then once I stopped doing stuff with him, then everything dried up. And then 2019 was a pretty unsuccessful, or the first part of actually eight or last part of 18 was no wait that was 17. That was a successful 4 months. Well, by June, that's when, or that was towards Memorial. It was towards Memorial Day that happened, and that's when stuff stopped completely. And a few calls here and there, but that was about it. Other than the fact that last year I had last year when I had one service call a week before. That was in February, and that was a bar. And like I said in an earlier stream, I will never do another bar again. One, when I was on the phone with the person, they never told me specifically what kind of equipment it was until I got there on site. Never agree to anything unless you know what's going on, because see, you're basically walking into a trap. And that's exactly what happened to me. They just said it was, yeah. I had to stop and buy a couple of drill bits because I snapped a few of them off today when I was working. So Flea Farm happened to have what I needed, so that's where I ended up going. So basically, when I went there, they had a bunch of cash registers and stuff. And in my honest opinion, I think that the whole system was an overkill for what they needed. Most of the other bars around here don't even have POS systems like that. They claim the reason that they bought them was, and I think they overpaid for them. They were each one was about 6,000 a piece, and that was back in 2010 for only 4 gigs of RAM and a 50 gig hard drive. And I'm thinking 6,000 a piece. I understand it's a totally different setup than a regular desktop computer, but I've even thought about getting one for here, but I'm actually glad I didn't buy one yet because I haven't really opened this place as a retail. I bought a $60 cash register, but I don't really it doesn't really work for what I need it for. So if anybody actually wants to buy it for 60, I gotta get my money back on. But if you want it for 60, I'll let you have it for $60. I got all the books and all the parts that go with it. So anybody's interested, hit me up, and or if you're from the Wisconsin area, cash only. I don't do checks or credit cards or debit, but cash preferably on it. So I would sell it for that. Maybe I'll make a review on it before I do it, but that's we'll wait and see. I don't know if I'm going to get around to that. Not only is it taking up space, but I have no use for it at this point in time. Who knows? Maybe I'll buy a POS system eventually, but it'd be more of a learning tool than it actually is a productive tool. At this point, I'm not gonna waste any money on something like that. So basically, by by the Friday of March 1st, things didn't work and stuff, and they didn't tell me that they were having problems with to begin with, and they conned it on me, and I was a big sucker to fall into their big conspiracy theory, as I called it. So I ended up having to fork over. I actually lost more money on that deal. Sometimes in a business like that, you do with people like that. And what I mean by that is it was probably over $500 by the time I was done. Even though that they paid me $150 for the service call, but that was mainly for the hard drive because what I didn't actually make much on or much of a profit off of it anyway. And other than it was bad enough that because they didn't tell me that how they backed it up or any of that information. They said it got backed up, but they didn't remember how it did. But then after the fact, after all the trouble that I went through with these things, they said, "Oh, I should have mentioned that before you had all that trouble." And I'm like, "Why didn't you say something before all this fiasco?" And they just said, "Well, we just assumed that we didn't need to tell you that." And I'm like, I didn't say much. I just kind of was a little burned out and irritated. And they just said, "Oh, whoop de doo." And I'm thinking, whoop de doo. Oh, whoop de doo. There's these things if you wreck them. I didn't say that, but I was tempted to. But I kept my P's and Q's and just kind of held back my comments on on that. So basically, when I my goal was with that one POS, because basically the two POSs talk to each other through the main terminal. So I was trying to get everything off the or from the hard drive to work on it to the external drive, and I thought theoretically that on a whim that you could do that with a system like that. And no, you, it would not work the way I was intending it to. And the reason for that was you think, sure, you got a second hard drive plugged in that you can just copy, but that doesn't quite work that way. And that's, and I will get to the point of the story where, or actually get at what kind of files and how I could have avoided all this by getting more information or drilling them for more information on it before doing any more with it before that point. So after migrating everything over to the other drive, then all of a sudden I did a quick reboot on it, and then everything disappeared. The whole database supposedly got wiped out. But the funny thing was, I was in such a panic. I was like around 11 o'clock that night. So I dragged all that crap, threw it in the back of my car. I went down to a local computer supply store because I pretty much given up hope on these things and figured let somebody else think around with them, and sure enough, as soon as I got them down to the establishment, they fired right up. By the grace of God, they were able to work, and I'm thinking, man, why why now and why not last night? Everything was there. Everything was just the way it was when they left it. Nothing was on, or nothing was harmed or anything. So basically, then I brought him back there, and the thing they didn't tell me was the guy that used them, or the owner of the establishment, he'd sit there and bang on the thing and just pound his fist on across the screen and start beating on or taking the keyboard and start banging on it, and no wonder it didn't work. No wonder it was having problems. He'd sit there and push too many buttons all at once, and then it would lock out, and then it would freeze, and then he'd get mad and take the keyboard and start smashing it across the machine, and that I could see why that wouldn't work. So then he'd call me screaming and hollering and using every foul word in the book, saying, "You God cheating son of a or SOB what in the F did you do to these things? And it turns out he conflicted all of that himself. Even though I got the short end of the stick on that because the find out that they worked, it cost me $123 for not even a whole hour, just like basically 15 minutes just to say to find out that they worked. I took them down to the service center, and then I got them back there, and they kept breaking down on him, and I just that one Friday night, I told those people after they were having more potential problems with it, I said, "Oh, by the way, I'm booked for the rest of the year," even though that wasn't true, but I didn't want to say I ain't servicing you no more. I'm done. Find somebody else and have a nice day. I just said I got a lot of appointments I gotta attend to. In that retrospect, that probably wasn't the right thing to do either. But you get burned when you bend over backwards for people, and that's just I won't do bars anymore. I'm done. So then that Saturday, I that's when I moved. Actually Friday morning is when I came and looked at this place, and then Saturday or Friday afternoon already. Once I got done dealing with the people at the bar, that's when I started working on this place. I basically started off here scrubbing all the walls and then down and got it prepped things for painting and that. So it wasn't until March I had a few service calls. And in April I had quite a few. I gained a couple of people. And then in May I had like 3 or 4 for the month. So I had one every week. So that wasn't the worst, and each one was about a $70 job. So that wasn't too bad. And then July, it was kind of quiet. No, actually, July I had like three service calls for the month. August I had a few. September was I had I would say I had probably about 20 service calls for that month. A lot of that I didn't talk about on camera at that point, but 20 was actually September was a good month. And then even October was a good month. November was decent. December was pretty good. I was actually selling a lot of service. I know in earlier streams I said that things were kind of tough, but I didn't money wise there wasn't a lot to be made on these, but it was enough to kind of sustain things a little bit. And then January was kind of quiet. Well, I got sick for a while. I'm heavy in that, but I ended up the daycare I was working for. I picked up since things weren't very sanitary there. I picked up a lot of crap, and that's where. And then for about a couple of weeks, I was down and out. So that was kind of unfortunate, but I didn't have anybody call anyway, so it actually worked out. But the phone I had before, I ended up getting one like this, kept crapping out on me. So that wasn't the worst. I didn't have to answer the phone or anything. But February was, I still had people. March was kind of it was a slow month, but even though COVID-19 was supposed to be the big bad flu, like I keep telling you, I don't buy into it. I don't buy into the lies and stuff and all the death rates and all these things like stay home, and I don't buy into any of that. And anybody else out there that believes that this is all real and running around wearing hazmat suits and carrying hundreds and hundreds of bottles of disinfectant and buying hundreds and hundreds of packs of toilet paper and Lysol wipes and stuff, you're crazy to go on a rampage and buy a huge stockpile of. Because not only does it make an inconvenience for the other people in the stores, but to sit there and hoard all that stuff, you don't even know what the contagion is. Sure, there's people that are sick, and sure, there's people that died, but it's not all COVID related. Some people just die of natural causes. Some die of old age. Some die from heart attacks. Some die from car accidents. There's some that died from other illnesses like pneumonia. There's some that died from suicide. But the thing is, why most hospitals labeled all those deaths as COVID was because if they did, they would get the government would give them a big kickback. Especially those people that did go to the hospital thinking that they had the symptom when it was all in their head. Especially if they had to use the beds and the ventilators and this their death killing blankets that had poison and stuff in them. It was all a big. It's all political and for people to actually believe this whole COVID thing, I just you have to you gotta be so blind in the dark to believe it. So basically, I was watching the last stream of or the kind of newsly style stream of Doctor or Rodney Howard Brown, the pastor that got arrested in Florida, and all of his streams that I've watched, they are very good in my honest opinion. There's a lot of people out there that think that he's a con artist and think that he's a fraud and think that he just makes up things and stuff like that. But I checked out a lot of his sources and websites that he talked about, and he's, to be completely honest, a lot of that stuff that he was talking about in the streams is pretty legit. Because if you go on the Rockefeller webpage and you go under the locksnip, there's a 50-page document talking about the globalists and the World Health Organization and the green or the environment thing in the United Nations and it's sadly Nobody wants to believe any of that stuff, and they just think, oh, why would they do such a thing? They would never do anything like that. Well, most people are so blind and in the dark, they won't understand. A lot of your public schools brainwash everybody with Common Core, and if you want a good education, you might as well just homeschool your kids because your public schools are just teaching you mush. Basically, all public schools are corrupt. I don't care where you go, what state you're in, what city. All your public schools are absolute garbage, and all your universities. I'm not talking. Your technical colleges are a different vocation, but your universities basically teach things at an atheistic view. They don't teach things from a Christian point of view, or it's basically they teach college students to accept socialism and to encourage socialism and leftism and stuff like that. And it, they don't even realize that they're being manipulated into it, and they don't even understand. Sadly, there's so much going on in the country and around the world that nobody even understands or even knows. But there's a few people out there that are on the same page that I am and that know about this stuff. And sure, their wife thinks they're crazy, and there's a couple of people in our church that I kind of get together with them and we all compare notes. And then there's a few people out in about 15, 20 miles from here that I keep in contact with. I guess you could say I kind of have a network of people that I keep up with. And then there's surrounding people in other states and stuff like that I've keep in contact with that we're from the area here, but nothing bad. It's not bad having people that you know. It's what's the point of life if you just isolate yourself and stay socially distant from people. And for a while, well, to be honest, I kind of thought it was a great thing. Isolate yourself from the world, and but after this whole thing of not being allowed to or being manipulated by your government to stay away from people, manipulated by your government to be forced to have church closed, which basically church never. There's nothing in the Constitution saying that a church has to surrender its right to the government. So basically, all the churches that closed, they could have all stayed open during this time. Because if you watch Dr. Rodney Howard Brown's show on breaking the law, there's a constitutional attorney on there, and that was a spectacular stream, in my opinion. It basically told you what was legal and what wasn't, and all the different fundamentals and stuff. And I thought that was spectacular. So anybody that's watching tonight, check it out. You'll be quite surprised what you'll learn on there. It's not all fake stuff. It's not all propaganda. It's the God honest truth on things that are going on. And if you watch Thursday night's stream, they'll talk about the agenda that they're trying to push up in Washington State with COVID testing and being locked down for God knows how long. So there's there's a lot of good information out there. It's just you gotta. And basically, I don't go on those streams for all the complete religious stuff. On in a way, I kind of do, but yeah, I'm mainly there just for the information on what's going on in America and around the world, and a lot of the stuff that's on there, you aren't gonna see on corrupt CNN. You're not gonna see it on corrupt Fox, or corrupt ABC, or corrupt NBC, or corrupt MSNBC, or corrupt CBS, or corrupt or any corrupt news, or corrupt Fox News. So the channels themselves aren't probably, but you know how the news is. It's so twisted. You don't even know what is what anymore, because they basically manipulate the news, or the news segments, to the point where, like, especially for all the political stuff with your candidates and politicians, it's so corrupt. I just actually stopped watching TV altogether. I don't watch news anymore on live TV. The only news I watch is just the weather to see what it is, but that's about it. I don't watch national news or anything, because everything is so wacky. It's just it just depresses you to sit there and watch it, and it demoralizes you. So I just stopped watching, and I haven't felt demoralized or depressed. That's true. I do a lot of relation for the last several generations has suffered from depression, and I guess you could say I kind of fall into that category as well. But that's not the whole main reason for life. It's something you're born with. It's something that's in your genetic genes. But I'm not really going to get into that on here. I don't even know why I brought that up, but so basically, it's they're already talking that like here in Wisconsin, like the bars are going to start opening. I can't wait for the bars to open, because I could actually go and socialize with some of my friends, and actually get out of the house and get out of the office. And the funny thing is, during this whole COVID time, yeah, you can go to Walmart, you can go to Fleet Farm, Menards, Lowe's, but you couldn't go to Hobby Lobby, you couldn't go to Sears, you couldn't go to Kohl's or Penny's, or. But how could Walmart and then the funny thing, a lot of the the smaller grocery chains were forced to close, but yet Walmart could stay open. Oh, I think that was kind of, there's propaganda behind that. If Why would they make all the other grocery stores close temporarily, but allow Walmart to only be open? Well, at least the hardware stores are open. Between, I have to admit, I get bored of Walmart. So a lot of times during the week, if I gotta get something, I'll sometimes go to Lowe's Home Improvement. I did end up having to go to Menards today, and I had to put on a stupid mask, because they live in fear there, and they let the devil take over them, and they just let idolatry. Basically, the mask is a crutch. The 6 feet distancing, social distancing, is a crutch. It's the Menards corporate or stores. They're playing into the fear. They kind of they kind of get like just because that one guy went in there screaming at everybody and yelling in their faces to put a mask on, and I'm sure he was spitting all over them people. And I'm thinking, well, if you want to wear a mask, good for you, buddy. But don't force everybody else to have to wear a mask and face shields and hazmat suits and carry thousands of gallons of disinfectant spray and for threatening to hose people down with disinfectants. Some of those chemicals are very caustic. And if you're sitting there threatening to hose everybody down with disinfectant, some of that stuff you can get chemical burns from. And and you're thinking that that's perfectly okay to do that to people, then there's something wrong with you. If you think that you got to hose everybody down with disinfectant, and well, that's the thing. Everybody was living, or there's still many people that are living in fear that they think that they have to have a mask on all the time. But actually, it's been proven that the mask, it, they did a study. There's a doctor out in the West Coast who did a study on the mask, and when it's humid out or hot, and you're breathing through that, they're saying that you're creating enough moisture and stuff that you can get yourself sick by wearing a mask. So, and I have to admit, they're hard to breathe through because I was forced to wear one in the store because I needed to stock up on more parts for the office here, like stuff like this, basically, and different odds and ends, and because you never know, you might be doing more stuff like that. So, but in my case against Menards, drop the thing forcing people to wear masks. Nobody's sick. Nobody's dying. Nobody's has COVID. Not some people might have the common flu or allergies, but not everybody that walking into Menards is going to have COVID. And for everybody to sit there and wail and cry over it's ridiculous. When I even popped in there for like 5 minutes just to get what I needed and get out, there's people like, "Don't get too close to me. I think I'm gonna get sick. I know I am." No, they weren't gonna get sick. They're they're basic. They're getting themselves so worked up that they thought that they were eventually they're gonna wear their immune system down to the point where they're gonna actually physically get sick. But that's not because they're picking up germs and stuff from the store. That's just because they're just acting idiotic and telling themselves that they're going to get sick when they really weren't. But it's almost 1:30 in the morning. And I need to get home and get ready for bed and stuff like that. But so on that note, I don't think I'm going to be doing a live stream tomorrow night. I'm probably going to take a night off from the office, potentially, maybe. Or maybe I'll, instead of doing a live stream, I'll actually upload the Dell Inspiron 2020 model. It's not from the year 2020. It's actually a decade, or the model was introduced a decade ago. That was the main reason for that one was, or that video was I was supposed to be selling at a show, and due to COVID-19, that show got canceled. They were generous enough to refund my money for the tables that I paid in advance for. So thank God for that. That I didn't lose any money on that. So I hope everybody had a good day. Hope everybody from Wisconsin enjoyed the beautiful weather here in Manitowoc County today. It was a gorgeous day to be working outside. It's just you can't complain. The sun was shining. So God bless everybody. Keep in faith with Jesus. Pray to Him. He does listen, and He will answer your prayers. Just to throw that out there, even though it seems like you ask for a certain request and stuff, He does fulfill most things, but not in a way that you'd expect. And that's kind of something that I was supposed to eventually let on. Sometimes he's got an interesting way of laying his hands on situations, and when you least expect something, that's when usually things happen. And not only does God make you all warm and bubbly and feel good on the inside, but it's just kind of when you open your heart to God, it just kind of makes you. It's so rewarding to not only to have a church to go to, but just to have a good relationship with God. When you have a close relationship with Him, and it's a very beautiful thing. So keep in faith and trust in Jesus. Walk with Him. Pray with Him, and He'll get. If you offer, if you repent and you offer up things to Him, He will in turn. He'll answer your prayers in one way or another. Might not be the way that you expected, but sometimes He has an interesting way of making things work out a certain way. Because there are certain situations even here where I pull all-nighters just to get something ready, and to find out that I stepped out of faith and didn't do, I didn't listen closely to His instructions, and then you put a lot of work into something for nothing when you should have prayed and asked in the first place. So I have a lot to learn yet. I have to admit that. But basically, anything is possible. God has His hand on everything, and eventually, everybody on earth has a purpose, but He won't reveal exactly what your mission on earth is. But you'd be quite surprised what He has up His sleeve for each and every individual. And basically, we're all God's children. So we will see you very soon. And enjoy the beautiful, beautiful weather that's coming very soon. Good night.